and Entergy, you would characterize they're worse. They're not up to the level in terms of their practices that. I mean, how many companies like Entergy are there?
Well, Entergy's the second biggest, and the first biggest is Exelon, and they own a plant in New Jersey called Oyster Creek, and they have made a decision, and it just got its 20-year license extension, and the state of New Jersey said, you're killing Barnegat Bay. We need cooling towers. And they basically said, if we put cooling towers in, before we do that, we'll shut this thing down. And they've come to an agreement with the state where they'll shut it down in 8 years rather than put in the cooling towers. And it gets to that same issue. It's these old plants with large staffs are not economical. And Exelon at Oyster Creek has said, if the NRC forces us to do one more major safety mod, it's cheaper to shut this thing down than to keep it running. So there's a lot of economic forces on these small single-unit nuclear power plants, especially because the price of gas is so low that they're really on the cusp of shutting down. And now with Fukushima, it's made it worse because there will be Fukushima modifications. Both Oyster Creek and Vermont Yankee are identical to Fukushima, and the containment vent failed at Fukushima 3 times, not just once, 3 times. So there'll be millions, if not tens of millions, in investment to make that problem go away. And the question is whether or not Entergy or Oyster Creek, Vermont Yankee or Oyster Creek, will figure that that's an economically justifiable decision. It boils down to money.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time, but I have so many more questions. I mean, one thing I definitely want to ask you is, what would if you had your druthers, what would you like to see happen with? I mean, how many nukes do we have in the U.S.?
We have 104 nukes.
Wow.
That's 20% of our electric load. And of the 104, 23 are identical to Fukushima. Awfully close to Fukushima. Maybe not identical, but awfully close. I think that I guess you can't shut off 20% of the power in the country overnight. It's been done. Actually, it was done in Juneau, Alaska. They had 3 power lines in, and one of the power lines failed in a mudslide. So they were down to 65% of their power, and nothing changed. People figured out how to do without 1/3 of their power.
That's interesting.
Now
For how long?
Oh, they went on for months, if not half a year. But they instead of running 2 elevators, they ran 1. And the theater marquee turned the lights off. On and on and on. But as a city, and Juneau's a big city. It's maybe not by New York City standards, but it's a big city, and it made it accommodated 1/3 less power than it had the day before. So could we do it? It would be troublesome. It would be would it be catastrophic? No, but it's not something that I can't believe politically we're going to allow happen. So we're not going to shut them down overnight. I am pushing really hard to get these 23 plants that are exactly like Fukushima reevaluated and backfitted. I think what that will cause is some of the single unit plants will say, we can't afford these changes. But the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not going to shut down a power plant. They never have. Actually, they did once. For 2 years, they shut down the Peach Bottom plant because they walked into the control room and all 5 reactor operators were asleep. And they said, whoops, I think you have a cultural problem. We better shut you down. So for 2 years, they shut down Peach Bottom. That's the only plant the NRC has ever shut down. So will they shut down as a result of Fukushima? No. But will the economics of these fixes cause management to shut their own reactors down? I think that may happen.
Uh-huh. So, okay, you're pushing for these 23 plants that are similar in design to Fukushima to be reevaluated. Other than what you're doing from your position, how much of an impact or not has Fukushima had on the NRC and its regulation or the industry itself? Is anybody, or is it just like, that's last week's news, last month's news, let's move on?
I think at the management level of the NRC, there's been no impact. I think at the NRC has some really good conscientious engineers, and they're getting sat on by the NRC's management structure. And I think this will embolden the engineering staff at the NRC to be more aggressive. So that would be good. I think it's going to raise the cost of these already costly new nukes. There was a story out about 3 or 4 weeks ago that said they thought the cost of a new nuke would increase by 10%. Well, if they're already $25 billion, that's $2.5 billion more. And it gets to the point where right now Wall Street won't finance them anyway. It'll boil down to economics. Does it make economic sense? It's not going to be safety because the NRC is not going to say that they're not safe.
Do you think that over the next, few decades, maybe more than a few, do you think that America's attitudes towards nuclear energy will mirror Western Europe's, Germany's? Do you think that, of course, you might just say it's all going to be pushed by economics, but how do you see attitudes above and beyond just the pure economics, which can change decade to decade? Given your length of experience in the industry, in the field, how do you see attitudes and perspectives changing overall, and where do you think we're headed culturally in that regard?
Yeah, the Germans, and Merkel is a physicist, and so the Germans decided not to build any new nukes and to shut down all of their old nukes in the next 11 years. The Italians voted not to build new nukes. The Swiss voted not to build new nukes. On the other hand, the French are still pro-nuclear, so the Western European sentiment is a little bit divided. But I keep coming back to money, and I'm sorry, it sounds callous, but the cost of these new nukes is going up, and the cost of the alternatives is going down. And the crossover is like right now. If without nuclear subsidies and without solar subsidies, solar and wind are roughly identical to a new nuke. So therefore, any new capacity doesn't have to be nuclear for economic reasons. Forget any other issue. Now, the old nukes are going to be cheaper than solar for quite a while yet, because they were built 40 years ago and their costs are amortized already. But as far as new capacity, we're going to find the economics of wind or solar or biomass or whatever is going to weigh people to make a decision. If a windmill throws a blade, it may wipe out the house on the next hill, but if a nuclear plant goes, look what happened to Fukushima. I think investors are going to say, wow, we have a lot of eggs in one basket here, and it's better to have many baskets with eggs. Then the last piece of that is that these central station power plants are the invention of the 20th century. We didn't have any in the 19th century, and we don't need them in the 21st because of smart grid. Computers now can direct the channel of energy to where it's needed much better than even 20 years ago. So it's called distributed generation. We'll have there's things called bloom boxes, which are like 1 or 2 megawatt power plants that can sit in a neighborhood, and they're no bigger than an F-150 pickup truck. And then if your neighborhood needs power, that bloom box turns on, and if another neighborhood needs it, that power gets sent over to the other neighborhood. So we're going to get a smart grid in the next 10 years, maybe 15 years, that will eliminate the whole concept of central station power.
Uh-huh. Now, that clearly relates, I imagine, to this vote coming up on Tuesday here locally.
Yeah, it really does. The Burlington Electric needs us to vote in the affirmative to buy into some smart grid technology. And as I understand the economics, it's really favorable in the long haul for us to do it. And I hope we all vote in favor of it.
Okay. Well, Arnie Gundersen, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the Howie Rose Show. Arnie's website is fairwinds.org. .com.
And there's an E in the middle.
There's an E after the word fair, fairwinds.com. So check out the numerous news feeds and videos on his site and stay informed and up to date. Any final thoughts?
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll be right back with Greg Guma and the news here on The Howie Rose Show. Stay tuned.
I think FP has been playing this music since like 8 o'clock last night. I had a feeling I turned on the radiator at like, I don't know, maybe 11:30, and this exact thing was playing, and then at 4 in the morning,
I heard about that.
this exact music was playing, and then at like 8:30 in the morning, this music was playing. I think FP is doing a marathon DJ set. Taking us a lesson from DJ Matt, marathoner.
Tell me everything I knew that guy.
He's got the longest show in radiator history, I believe.